Hello, fellow bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I want to discuss a recent read of mine, The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This book has been making the rounds on BookTube lately, and with good reason, because it's a wonderful retelling of Pride and Prejudice that gives any Austen fan reason to squeal with excitement. The Other Bennet Sister is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice told from the often overlooked Mary Bennet's point of view. In the original Pride and Prejudice, most readers find Mary dull at best and otherwise smug, pious, and sanctimonious. She's a character who is overshadowed in personality and plot involvement by almost every other character, including the lovely Jane Bennet, charming, attractive, and witty Lizzie Bennet, and impulsive and boisterous Lydia Bennet. Not to mention a whole host of other quite engaging characters. But Janice Hadlow manages to take Mary, the dull, supporting character of Pride and Prejudice, and turn her into a bona fide Austen heroine in her own right. The Other Bennet Sister is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice in every sense of the word. Only the first 30% of the book strictly follows the events of Pride and Prejudice, but then Hadlow creates another story for Mary that follows the fundamental building blocks of Pride and Prejudice and takes inspiration from Austen's other works. Instead of overcoming her pride like Lizzie's character must do in Pride and Prejudice, Mary is tasked with overcoming a lack of confidence and self-esteem. Her journey of visits to various relatives over the course of the book becomes a journey of self-discovery, and the reader becomes desperate to know if she will ultimately allow herself to embrace the happiness and love that every heroine deserves. Janice Hadlow finds a way of adding many meaningful interpretations and suggestions to Austen's work without disrespecting the original. She uses the original dialogue of Pride and Prejudice in the first third of the book to establish the authenticity of Austen's characters, but then she is able to expand some of the less developed characters in interesting ways. In addition to Mary, she focuses on Mr. Collins, Charlotte Lucas, Mrs. Gardiner, and Miss Caroline Bingley, and her take on Mr. Collins and Charlotte Lucas's relationship alone is worth reading this book. Mr. Collins retains his original ridiculousness, but he becomes more than that original caricature, as Hadlow masterfully adds a sympathetic layer of emotional complexity behind his irksome facade. Charlotte becomes less sympathetic. Mrs. Gardiner becomes a fully fledged joy of a character, and the familiar Caroline Bingley's personality is emphasized and expanded to new depths. Hadlow also creates two brilliant new male characters, Mr. Ryder and Mr. Tom Hayward, who are so carefully and thoughtfully realized that they deserve to be discussed along with Austen's own creations. With Hadlow's additions, she draws attention to the predicament of the female gentry and the socioeconomic pressures of marriage, and expands upon Austen's common themes of spinsterhood, education, morality, the value of novels, and the dichotomy between reason and rationality versus emotion and spontaneity. But the true strength of this book comes from the subtleties of human thought and emotion, and how they are expertly conveyed to the reader. Hadlow explores the gamut of human emotion and the human thinking process in such a thorough and unbelievable way, which is very different from the manner in which Jane Austen conveys emotional depth, but remarkably just as effective, and that's not something I say lightly. But I would be remiss if I made this book seem like a work of perfection. Thematically, I was astounded, and every Jane Austen lover really should read this book, devour it, and enjoy it. But structurally, a little more attention during the editing process would have perhaps been beneficial. The book was excessively long and lagged in the middle. There were also many bits and pieces of heavy-handed writing that beat the reader over the head with metaphor. I think the reason I'm so harsh on the middle section of this book is that it's framed by so many passages of exquisite prose and talented writing. With just a little bit of tweaking in the middle of the book, some judicial pruning of passages, maybe a few extra bits of historical context, and a final read-through to catch any breaches of Regency etiquette, this book would have been perfection in every way. As it is, it's a triumph of a debut and something I want to thrust into the hands of all Austen lovers. I read this book at the end of April, and the further away that I get from it, the less I focus on its shortcomings, and the more I remember how perceptive it is thematically, and how the ending gave me that same sense of bliss and satisfaction that I experienced when I finished an Austen book for the first time. Despite my critiques, I wouldn't be surprised if this made my best books of the year list, and it is a book that I'm continuing to think about as I move on to other books. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on The Other Bennet Sister. Have you read this book? I know it's making the rounds and it's quite popular on BookTube lately. Did you enjoy it? Did you find it hard to read or problematic in any way? I'd love to know in the comments down below. And if you liked this book, did you also read Miss Austen? And what did you think of the two in comparison? I'm sure that I will be making a video at some point of different Austen adaptations from this year, because there have been quite a few of them, certainly Miss Austen and The Other Bennet Sister as the prominent ones that I'm aware of, and it's really interesting to talk about the two of them in unison, so I will probably do that in Jane Austen July. But until next time, I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!